I was involved back in the 1970s when a whole group of young people, very young people, decided that we were going to take on the French to stop them doing atmospheric testing at Muir Atoll. People laughed at us. It was a superpower. The area that it was where the tests were taking place was in French territory, colonial territory. But our group started a big campaign in New Zealand to convince politicians to support what we were doing. We then sent boats across the sea 3,000 miles away to sit in the testing zone, and we stopped the French from testing. And I guess the message of that is if you want something bad enough, you have to work for it. Slogans don't achieve anything. Shouting at people doesn't achieve anything. It just means that they do exactly the reverse. So what it is about engaging, but also engaging in terms of getting action. One of the things that I'm very keen to promote is for all of the states to do some real heavy lifting on renewable energy, and that's something that I've been campaigning on, will continue to. In South Australia, I was elected 7 years ago. We did not have one single wind tower. We now have 56% of the nation's wind power. So we've got basically more power than all of the other bigger states and territories put together. We've also got 30% of the nation's solar power. We've got about 90% of the geothermal development, worth $800 or $900 million. So whilst the federal government has told all of the states and territories that we must have 20% of our power coming from renewables by 2020, South Australia will reach that target 7 years ahead of schedule. So whilst the rest of the nation are saying it's too hard, too difficult to get to 20% of their power by 2020, we're aiming for 33%, and we actually hope to do even better. And one of the things is not only to put the policies in place. We were the first state to bring in greenhouse gas reduction legislation, setting targets, but we've also putting our money where our mouth is. So we've got a solar feed-in tariff so that everyone who has solar power puts it back into the grid gets paid double. So we have 3 times the national take-up of solar power in the state. Also importantly, the state government is a big purchaser of energy. Every state government is, for hospitals, schools, government buildings. By 2014, 50% of our power, 50% that we use will come from wind energy, and then we're going to move to 100%. So what we're doing is putting our money where our mouth is. We've changed legislation to ban plastic bags, which saves $400 million a year. We've banned genetically modified crops, and we've also got container deposit legislation. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're putting our legislation where our mouth is. Well, obviously, I, as chair of the Council of the Federation a couple of years ago, commissioned Ross Garnaut, and I think that was very important. That was a state initiative. It wasn't a federal initiative, but we were able to pass it over to the Kevin Rudd government. So what I try to do is to advocate for energy efficiencies, renewable energy at the Council of Australian Governments, which is the Prime Minister and all the states. But I've now been made the international head of the Climate Group's conference for states, territories, regions and provinces. Now, most of the attention tends to be on national governments, signing Kyoto, emissions trading, what's going to happen in Copenhagen. But 80% of the environmental decisions are actually made by regional or state governments. So I'll be going to Copenhagen, and I'll be working with representatives of Canadian provinces, African provinces, German states, Spanish states, and also the United States and the United States, people like Arnold Schwarzenegger and others, in hoping to come out with a major statement of targets for what state governments can do. We can reduce that dependence in terms of, for instance, what Australia does in terms of its power by doing what we're doing in terms of renewable energy. I mean, what I want to see set up is a green grid that powers the national grid. And I'd like to see that in South Australia because we've got incredibly good wind prospectivity. We've got this geothermal resource, which is, of course, not it's not as variable as wind and solar, and we've also got great potential for solar thermal. So one of the things I would like to see happen, and to get that done we need better transmission lines. That's the real key, is to have a much bigger embrace of renewable energy to reduce the nation's reliance on coal. But you know, I mean, there's this debate between coal and uranium, and it's very interesting that, and I don't want to see nuclear power in Australia, but it's interesting that people like Tim Flannery and others are saying, you know, we've got a situation where some countries are going to have to decide between coal and nuclear, and we're going to have to work out, okay, what produces the most emissions or what doesn't produce emissions at all. These are hard decisions that people in power have to make, and I guess it comes back to my bottom line. Now, we've got in South Australia, I guess, a frightening glimpse of climate change with the River Murray, and it's kind of like, it's not a future issue, climate change, it's a clear and present danger. What I don't want to see come out of Power Shift or any other conference is people feeling good about slogans, because ultimately it's about action, and young people, if they get motivated and organised, can really stop superpowers and change governments.